So far, we've focused on doing regulatory research using freely available government resources in print and online. In this video, we will look at the three primary legal research platforms, Westlaw, Lexis, and Bloomberg Law. We'll focus on how to browse these sources for regulatory info, particularly the Code of Federal Regulations. Now, the first question to ask is, why use one of these legal research platforms? Three main reasons. First, on each of these sources, the Code of Federal Regulations is continuously updated with the Federal Register, so you know that you're getting updated information. You should still check to see how current each entry is. Second, these sources have value-added information, citations to the U.S. Code, administrative decisions, and secondary sources. With Lexis, you can shepherdize, and with Westlaw, you can key cite to find additional information. Unfortunately, Bloomberg Law's site header does not currently update the CFR. Third, a major reason you might use one of these platforms is simply for convenience. If you or your law firm subscribes to one or the other, you may be accustomed to doing your research on that platform. But keep in mind how much it costs you or your firm as you're doing a search on one of these sources. Finally, remember that the CFR and the Federal Register on all of these sources are not official sources of law. If you need an official source, you must use a print or electronic government source. With that in mind, let's take a look at a few characteristics of these sites. First, Westlaw Next. If you have a particular citation, you can always enter that into the main search box. But if you're looking to browse, you can find the CFR easily and fairly straightforwardly on Westlaw Next. From the home screen, select Regulations, and then on the next screen, select the Code of Federal Regulations. You'll then be looking at the table of contents for the Code of Federal Regulations. Each title is hyperlinked. I'm going to select Title 24 for Housing and Urban Development. You can keep drilling down till you get to the portion that you're interested in. Let's say that I'd like to look at the Neighborhood Reinvestment Corporation, which is at Title 24, Section 4100. So here is the text for that first portion of the regulatory section. Look at the various parts. There's an outline that provides context, and it's always smart to look in front and behind of where you're at in the CFR to make sure you're not missing anything. Next, you see the citation for this particular section. And now look at that link that says Currentness. If we click here, then we're taken to the bottom of the page where it tells you the last update from the Federal Register. And this portion was last updated on the 24th of October. Now let's go back to the top of the document and look at the tabs. This is the value-added information that you'll find on Westlaw Next. The tabs provide links to notes of decision, regulatory history, citing references, and context and analysis. If we select citing references, this is what we find. Notice the types of references that cite this regulation. It's up to you to sort through and determine if any of these references is needful for your research. Next, let's look at the Context and Analysis tab. This shows you secondary sources like law review articles. It also contains links to primary sources pertinent to this regulation, such as the legislation in the USC and the regulatory summaries in the Federal Register. This info can be especially helpful when you're expanding your regulatory research. Now let's repeat the same process in Lexis Advance. Lexis Advance, I've found, is not as intuitive to use as Westlaw Next. In order to do a search for only regulations on Lexis Advance, you first need to specify the content type. So you click on that, and that opens this box, and then you check the box Administrative Codes and Regulations, and then you're searching within specifically administrative and regulatory information. If you want to browse, sort of a three-step process. First, you select Browse Sources. Second, you search for Code of Federal Regulations, and then you're given the page that we're looking at, and then you click on the link that says View Table of Contents. After those three steps, you are now looking at the table of contents for the Code of Federal Regulations, and we want to select Title 24 and expand the table till we get to the portion that we want. Here then is the regulatory entry for 24 CFR 4100.1. Things you want to check, again, you want to look for the currentness. In Lexis Advance, it's right up there at the top, and you see it was also last updated from the Federal Register on the 24th of October. And you also see the citation. And you see the button for Shepherdized. We're not going to click on that just yet. First we want to look toward the bottom where in Lexis Advance they give you additional information such as the statutory authorities, history from the Federal Register, and then some secondary references under annotations. So if we do click on Shepherdized, then we're given this page here. This gives us citing decisions as well as citations to law reviews and treatises. There's not much here pertaining to this particular CFR section. Bloomberg Law. Lastly, let's do the same search on Bloomberg Law. In order to search the Code of Federal Regulations on B-Law, from the main page you select Legislation and Regulation, and then from the drop-down menu you select Code of Federal Regulation. This takes you to the table of contents for the Code of Federal Regulation. Much like Lexis, this TOC expands as you drill down, so we'll find our Title 24, looks like that, and we see the hyperlink for 24 CFR 4100.1. This should be looking familiar to you now. Here is the outline. The citation over to the right, it indicates the currentness. And you see this was more recently updated than Lexis or Westlaw. It was updated a week later on November the 1st. B-Law is not, however, as developed as Lexis or Westlaw. The B-Law citator, as I said before, does not work with the Code of Federal Regulations on Bloomberg Law, and there are no links to additional material. There is, however, at the bottom of the page a link to the original version of the regulation in the Federal Register. Important if you're trying to do a historical look at this particular code section, but there's nothing further. So that gives you a broad overview of regulatory research on these three legal research platforms. We'll look at this more in detail in class on Monday and try a couple exercises, and I'd like for you to come prepared to answer this question. We're going to talk about it in class and use these research platforms to dig a little deeper. Use of the term organic. I have a brand new breakfast cereal that I want to market as Chad's Organic O's. What are the current rules concerning the labeling of organic products? And I will give you a hint, this is going to be within the purview of the Department of Agriculture.